My name is Samantha Blake. I'm 34, a major in military intelligence, but to my family, I was just Vanessa's little sister. At my sister's 20-year company gala, surrounded by her designer friends and polished guests, they laughed when she called my job paperwork. I stayed silent. Until her 9-year-old daughter stood up in front of them all, lifted a coin I once gave her, and said, "You don't get it, my aunt's a hero." That moment didn't just hush the room, it rewrote everything I thought I'd lost. If your family ever made you feel invisible, keep watching. Because this story isn't about getting even. It's about being finally truly seen. The chandeliers sparkled like a crown above the dining hall, casting golden light over glassware and white linens. Everything in that room, every plate, every name card, every floral centerpiece screamed perfection. And that made sense. This was Vanessa Carter's 20-year anniversary gala for her company Carter Luxe Events. My sister's empire, her stage, her people. I stood near the entrance for a second longer than I should have, still holding the small gift box I brought. It was a set of handcrafted coasters from a veteran-owned business I liked supporting. I knew they wouldn't match the vibe here, but I brought them anyway. Just to be polite. Vanessa spotted me before I could make my way fully inside. She glided over in a champagne-colored gown, hair in a soft wave, makeup flawless as always. Her smile was wide, rehearsed, but her eyes skimmed over my navy slacks and fitted blouse like they were a problem she couldn't fix with a spotlight. "Samantha, you made it," she said, her voice tight with a touch of surprise, like I was a distant cousin showing up uninvited. I handed her the box, "Just a little something," I said. She accepted it with that same pageant smile and waved a manicured hand toward the hall. "We're just getting to drinks. Come on in." The clinking of glasses and murmured laughter filled the space. I moved through the room, slowly nodding at unfamiliar faces, men in tailored suits, women in dresses that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Vanessa's world was one of curated perfection, and I was the outlier in my sensible flats and military-issued watch. I shouldn't have come. But Dad had called twice asking me to support your sister's big night. I spotted him near the bar. Richard Blake, my father, retired engineer turned hobbyist golfer. He raised his scotch in my direction, then turned back to a conversation with a man I didn't recognize. Charlotte, my stepmother, was already deep in conversation with a group of women near the hors d'oeuvres. Her pearl earrings swung slightly as she laughed at something one of them said. Her laughter stopped when she noticed me. She offered a polite smile, then went back to her conversation. I was used to that. Vanessa floated from group to group, collecting compliments like party favors. I sipped my sparkling water and stuck to the edges. I wasn't invisible, not exactly. Just unnecessary. Dinner was called an hour in. The place cards had been perfectly arranged, of course. Vanessa and her husband Brian sat at the head of the long rectangular table. My card was nestled between a woman named Karen, one of Vanessa's marketing friends I gathered, and Brian's old college roommate, a man named Mitch who sold tech startups. I took my seat, smoothed my napkin, and smiled when someone across the table made eye contact. Then I faded back into silence. Appetizers were served. Conversation flowed around me. Real estate deals. Summer travel plans. Vanessa's upcoming feature in a design magazine. Karen turned to me at one point, glass of wine in hand, and asked in a curious tone, "So, Samantha, what do you do exactly in the military?" I swallowed a bite of salad. I opened my mouth to answer, but Vanessa's voice cut in from 2 seats down. "Oh, Sam's in logistics or analysis or something like that. It's all very behind the scenes." She didn't even glance at me as she said it. Just kept her eyes on her plate, casually dismissive. Karen smiled. "Oh, like managing the paperwork stuff. That's cool, I guess." Someone chuckled. I wasn't sure who. Maybe Mitch. Maybe Brian. I pressed the edge of my fork into the tablecloth, steadying my breath. "Actually, I work in intelligence," I said softly. Vanessa looked up, then blinking as if surprised I'd spoken. "That's right," she said, nodding slightly. "It's something to do with charts and reports. She's very good with systems." More laughter. Light. Painless. Unintentional perhaps. But it sliced all the same. I wanted to stand up to say something that would stop them in their tracks. To remind them that just because I couldn't discuss my work didn't mean it lacked meaning. But I didn't. I took another sip of water, stared at the centerpiece in front of me. White roses, classic, predictable. Brian leaned forward with that ever-charming grin of his. Hey, at least you're not stuck in the corporate world. Right, Sam? You get to dodge all this drama. I offered him a tight smile. My pulse drummed in my ears. I could feel Charlotte watching me, probably wondering if I'd make a scene. I never did. Dinner rolled on. More courses, more clinking glasses, toasts and anecdotes. Vanessa's staff flitted in and out, adjusting the lighting, refilling wine. It was flawless. And I was disappearing by the minute. Until Lily's voice broke the rhythm. But that would come later. For now, I sat at that table surrounded by crystal and candlelight, listening to people talk about things that sparkled, things that could be measured in headlines or square footage or likes on social media. And in that moment, I knew this wasn't just another evening of being dismissed. This was the night I decided I wouldn't let them write my story anymore. I was 8 the first time I realized our house had different rules depending on which daughter you were. It was a colonial-style home just outside Raleigh, white shutters, brick steps, perfect lawn. From the outside, everything looked orderly, warm, welcoming. Inside, it was Vanessa's kingdom. Vanessa was 10 years older than me, and by the time I came along, she was already a force. Debating trophies lined the mantel. Her ballet shoes were framed in the hallway. Every holiday card featured her smile front and center, while I stood off to the side, slightly blurred like an afterthought. Richard, my father, was a man of diagrams and logic. An engineer by trade, a sketchpad always nearby. He loved precision, symmetry, and Vanessa. Charlotte, his second wife, stepped in when I was barely 3. She wore pearls like armor and kept scented candles lit in every room. Her version of parenting was presentation, and in that presentation there was only space for 1 star. I don't remember when I stopped calling her mom. Maybe I never really did. She preferred Charlotte anyway. Said it sounded more elegant. My room was the smallest, tucked at the back of the hall overlooking the fence line. Vanessa's room, even after she left for college, stayed untouched. Posters of Ivy League campuses. A bulletin board with her debate medals. When I asked why I couldn't move into her bigger room, Charlotte told me gently but firmly that it was important to preserve the space. Just in case Vanessa needed to come home. By the time I turned 13, I had grown used to the background. I kept to myself. I liked puzzles, diagrams, anything with order. I spent hours building model bridges, folding origami, drawing constellations. At school, I was quiet but consistent. My science teacher, Mrs. Keller, saw something in me. She encouraged me to apply for the state science summer program, a 3-week residential camp for kids gifted in STEM. I still remember the day I got the acceptance letter. It was a thick envelope, crisp, addressed to me. I ran all the way home from the bus stop, clutching it like treasure. I burst through the door and waved it in the air. I got in, I said, breathless. I got accepted. It's in Chapel Hill. 3 weeks of labs and experiments and lectures from real scientists. Charlotte looked up from the dining table where she was arranging flowers. Her lips curved into something between a smile and a frown. 3 weeks away, she said. Are they providing security supervision? Yes, I said. They have staff on site and a nurse and a counselor, and Vanessa walked in at that moment, back from college for spring break. She was wearing a blazer even though it was March, her hair sleek, her walk full of purpose. What's all the noise? She asked. Samantha got into some science thing, I said proudly. State level, she said. It's a big deal. Vanessa raised an eyebrow and took the envelope from my hand, scanning the contents. Her expression didn't change. She looked over at Charlotte. 3 weeks away from home, with a bunch of nerds running around the woods. I don't know, Mom. Sounds kind of risky. Charlotte sighed, setting down the hydrangeas. I agree, she said. We don't really know who's running this. I'd rather not send her off to something like that. But it's science, I said, my voice shrinking. It's what I'm good at. Vanessa gave me back the envelope with a tight smile. You're good at lots of things, she said. But maybe this one isn't the right fit. There'll be other camps. There weren't. That summer, I stayed home. I watched reruns on the small television in my room and doodled diagrams of circuits I never got to build. Vanessa flew to Chicago for an internship. Charlotte went on about how poised she looked in her business attire. Dad nodded and went back to reviewing blueprints for a project he was consulting on. No one asked me how I felt about missing the program. No one even brought it up again. That was the first time I truly understood something no one ever said out loud. That being allowed to shine required permission. And in our house, permission was a privilege granted to Vanessa. After that, I learned to adapt. I did my homework. I kept my room neat. I said thank you and cleaned my plate. I didn't talk too much at dinner. I let the spotlight stay where it belonged. But I also started building walls. I kept journals no one read. I created fake project outlines and filed them in binders, pretending I was already working for something bigger. I read about women in STEM, women in the military, women who had to fight for room in rooms where they weren't wanted. I didn't tell anyone what I was planning, but by the time I was 16, I already knew I wasn't going to follow Vanessa's path. At a parent-teacher night, one of my instructors told Charlotte Samantha's got a sharp mind. Quiet, but serious. She has leadership potential. Charlotte smiled politely, then turned and asked about Vanessa's latest internship. The teacher looked confused. At some point, I stopped being surprised. Even now, I can still hear Vanessa's voice when I open that envelope. Maybe this one isn't the right fit. I carried that sentence with me longer than I care to admit. But the strange thing is, it didn't kill my ambition. It redirected it. Away from their approval. Toward something I could build on my own terms. Years later, when I got my first military commendation, I held the certificate in my hand and remembered that thick white envelope from age 13. Both paper. But only one of them had led me to something real. The camp I never attended faded like most missed chances do. But what it left behind, resentment, resolve, and the quiet kind of hunger, they stayed. They still do. Vanessa was on the cover of a lifestyle magazine by the time she was 32. Her photo was taken on the deck of a luxury yacht, champagne flute in hand, a soft breeze lifting her perfectly curled hair. The headline read, "The event architect behind the East Coast's most exclusive galas." Carter Luxe Events was her kingdom. Based out of Charlotte but active up and down the coast, her company specialized in planning multi-million-dollar weddings, political fundraisers, and tech launch parties for people who didn't blink at paying $50,000 for floral arrangements. At home, you couldn't escape it. Richard framed every magazine spread and hung them in the hallway. Charlotte rearranged the living room photos so Vanessa's appearances on news segments took center stage. The old family portraits, the ones where I stood stiff and smiling beside her, slowly disappeared. Dinner conversations became press briefings. Did you see Vanessa's interview on Channel 7 last night? Vanessa's team just closed a 500-guest wedding in Palm Beach. Senator Klein sent a thank you note. It was endless. And I stopped trying to keep up. Sometimes when I came home for holidays, I'd sit through these meals like a ghost in my own chair. Charlotte would ask about my base like it was a hotel. So Fort Belvoir. Is that close to DC? How's the cafeteria food over there? Once when I mentioned we'd just wrapped a joint training op with the NSA, she smiled like I'd told her I learned to make banana bread. Oh good, she said. Just as long as you're keeping busy. Vanessa would chime in with her signature half compliment. It's nice that you found something stable. Sam's structure seems to work for you. When I was 29, I received commendation for helping disrupt a terrorist cell's encrypted communications before they could detonate a coordinated attack overseas. I wasn't allowed to disclose the details, but I tried cautiously to share a moment from that experience over Thanksgiving dinner. I had barely opened my mouth when Charlotte cut in. Samantha, we've talked about this. You know you're not allowed to share those classified things. I hadn't even said what country I'd been in. I was careful. I always was. But her voice was sharp and final. Vanessa smiled sweetly across the table as she passed the cranberry sauce. We just want to make sure no one gets in trouble, right, Sam? Richard barely looked up from his plate. It's all complicated stuff anyway, he said. I never did understand military things, and that was that. That same night, Vanessa stood up and played a sizzle reel. Her staff had cut together slow-motion footage from one of her latest gala events. Fireworks over the water, aerial shots of cascading flowers, speeches from donors. The entire family clapped. Charlotte wiped a tear and whispered, You make us so proud. I sat with my hands folded in my lap, listening to the applause. I told myself it didn't matter. That service was never about praise. But even the strongest soldier has moments when she just wants to be seen. One afternoon, I came by the house and found Charlotte rearranging the entryway shelf. She was replacing a small photo of me in uniform, one of the few that had survived, with a new framed article of Vanessa hosting a fundraiser for children's cancer research. I paused at the door. You could have just added another frame, I said quietly. Charlotte jumped slightly, then composed herself. Oh, sweetie, it's just the layout. I wanted the color tones to match the wall better. She smiled and adjusted a candle beside it. Besides, she added, people always ask about Vanessa's events when they visit. It's good for conversation. That was the point of pride in our house, who drew attention, not who kept people safe in silence. At Christmas, I noticed they had started referring to Vanessa's company as the family business. Vanessa built Carter Lux from scratch, Richard said one night. You know, she runs a tight ship just like her old man. I blinked. I didn't realize throwing million-dollar parties and decrypting terror threats were both considered ship-worthy enterprises. It became clear over time that Vanessa wasn't just their success story. She was their brand. Everything else, including me, was background texture. Eventually, I stopped volunteering updates. I'd ask about Lily. I'd compliment Charlotte's cooking. I'd take my place at the table and pass the mashed potatoes. And in the quiet, I built something they didn't see. My work continued. My skills sharpened. My team expanded. And while Vanessa's face graced billboards and gala invitations, mine showed up on Zero Press, but in briefing rooms where decisions were made that changed the course of real things. Things that mattered. I didn't need my photo on the wall. But sometimes walking past it, I wished there'd been room for both of us. I didn't know where else to go, so I went where everything had to be earned. The army wasn't in my original plan. I'd never imagined myself in boots, let alone on a base surrounded by fences and acronyms. But after graduation, when every college letter had come back with bad news or no aid and no one in my family seemed to care what I did next, I walked into a recruiting office on Glenwood Avenue and asked for the hardest job that didn't involve flying or defusing bombs. The recruiter blinked at me, then smiled. That's a first, he said. I wasn't looking for adventure or escape. I was looking for structure. A place where silence wasn't weakness and precision was power. Basic training at Fort Jackson was brutal. South Carolina's July heat made the air feel like soup, and the first few mornings I thought I might throw up from the stress alone. We woke before dawn to run in formation, do push-ups in the mud, haul sandbags up hills. My shoulders ached for weeks. But I found something I didn't expect: clarity. There were no favorite daughters in formation. No one cared who your sister was. The only thing that mattered was whether you could follow orders, show up, and push through. I wasn't the strongest or the fastest, but I outlasted the ones who were. By the third week, my drill sergeant started calling me the compass. Blake doesn't talk much, he said to the squad, but she's always facing the target. That stuck. I tested into intelligence specialization after advanced training. It felt like home. Data streams, satellite footage, encrypted comms. I didn't just understand patterns, I heard them like background music. I spent years moving base to base, from Fort Huachuca to Ramstein in Germany, then Bagram, then a temporary posting in Jordan. I learned how to coordinate intel drops, how to detect false flags, how to translate shifts in troop chatter into life-saving moves. There was pressure always. Some days we had minutes to reroute an entire convoy based on half a conversation in Pashto. But I never hesitated. In 2021, during Operation Cascade Sentinel, hesitation could have killed 70 men. The target was in northern Syria, tucked into a rural zone with known militant activity. Intel suggested the area was clear for extraction. Plans were drawn. Ground teams prepped. But something didn't sit right with me. The timing on some intercepted signals felt wrong. Repetitions, uncharacteristic delays. I didn't sleep that night. I reanalyzed satellite data, cross-checked heat signatures, compared them to older Taliban training patterns I'd studied 2 years prior. By dawn, I submitted a full rewrite of the route and flagged it as critical. The chain of command called an emergency huddle. Some pushed back. "It's a gut call," one major said. "Why change the plan over a hunch?" I remember standing in that briefing room, spine straight, voice calm. "It's not a hunch," I said, "it's a pattern I can prove." They paused. They listened. The convoy changed course. 10 hours later, a drone sweep confirmed heavy enemy movement exactly where we would have driven through. Not one casualty. Not one shot fired. When we debriefed, my CO pulled me aside. "Your call saved lives," he said quietly. "I hope you know that 3 weeks later I was awarded the Meritorious Service Medal." The ceremony was closed. Just a few handshakes, folded flags, the hum of a projector in the background. There were no cameras. No framed photos, no headlines. Back home, no one mentioned it. Charlotte sent me an email that said, "Heard you got something, congrats, hope you're staying hydrated." Vanessa didn't say anything. So I tucked the medal in my footlocker beside a worn copy of a leadership manual I still reread when things got hard. The next time I visited home, Charlotte was planning Vanessa's company rebrand. Carter Lux Global. She wanted to go international. At dinner, Richard asked if I was still stationed in Virginia. "Still at the base," he said, slicing his steak. "Must be cozy to stay in one place for once," I nodded. I didn't mention the forward operating base I'd rotated through 6 weeks earlier or the fact I hadn't slept more than 5 hours in a row in months. They didn't ask, so I didn't offer. But on base things were different. Lieutenant Kim once told me she briefed her new analysts using my Cascade Sentinel report as a model. Sergeant Ortega brought me a coffee after a 12-hour shift and said, "Ma'am, you don't miss." My team trusted me. Not because of who I was, but because I never let them down. Every time I walked through the secured doors, swiped my ID, and stepped into the heart of the Intelligence Ops Center, I felt the weight of silence lift. I didn't need applause. But I did need to belong somewhere. And I had found it. It was a weekend in early spring when I made the mistake of staying overnight at Vanessa's. I had just returned from a 3-week rotation coordinating intel with NATO officers in Brussels. Jet-lagged, sun-starved, and operating on less than 4 hours of sleep, I agreed to come down to Charlotte for Dad's birthday dinner. Vanessa offered to host, of course. Said she had room, and it would be easier for everyone if I just stayed with them instead of finding a hotel. I didn't want to. But I said yes. Her house was pristine, like something out of an interiors magazine. Soft gray walls, white marble countertops, art pieces I didn't recognize but suspected cost more than my entire wardrobe. She gave me the guest room off the kitchen. Smaller than her master suite by miles, but still crisp and curated. A floral candle on the nightstand, fresh towels folded like a hotel. A welcome card in embossed gold lettering that read, "Simply make yourself at home." I didn't. Dinner was what I expected. Dad sat at the head of the table talking about his new golf swing. Charlotte complimented the wine. Vanessa ran the conversation like she ran her events, tight, focused, sparkling. I listened. I smiled. I didn't offer much. By the time everyone had gone to bed, I stayed up in the guest room checking messages from base. A new assignment was forming something in cyber threat tracing out of North Africa. I stared at my screen until the letters blurred, then finally shut the laptop and stretched out on the bed. It must have been close to midnight when I heard the door creak open. I sat up halfway, expecting maybe Vanessa forgot something in the room. But instead, a small head peeked in. Lily. She was 9, barefoot, hair slightly tangled from sleep. Her pajama top had stars on it. She stepped inside, carefully closing the door halfway behind her. "Hey," I whispered. She patted across the carpet and stood at the edge of the bed looking up at me like she wasn't sure if she was about to get scolded. "Can I ask you something?" she said quietly. "Sure," I said, patting the space beside me. "Sit." She climbed up, legs crisscrossed, hands in her lap. She looked down for a second, then up at me again. "Have you ever saved someone?" she asked. The question caught me off guard. "What do you mean?" I asked gently. "Like in real life," she said. "Not in a game or a show, but like someone who was in danger." "Did you help them?" I paused. I thought about Operation Cascade Sentinel. About the warning I'd sent that rerouted the convoy. About the message I got from a ranger weeks later that simply said, "You don't know me, but I'm alive because of what you did." "Yeah," I said softly, "I have." Her eyes widened. Really, I reached over to the drawer in my overnight bag and pulled out something I kept with me on long rotations. A challenge coin from my last deployment. It wasn't official issue, just something my unit had made on their own. Heavy dark bronze. One side had our insignia, the other had words etched deep into the metal. I handed it to her. She turned it over in her small hands. "What's this?" "It's a coin my team gave me," I said. "They gave them to everyone on the mission after it was over." She squinted at the back. "What does it say?" "For eyes that saw what others didn't," I said. Lily blinked slowly, then whispered, "That sounds like a superhero thing." I smiled. "Sort of," I said, "just not in a cape." She traced the letters with her finger. "Did anyone else in the family see this?" she asked. "No," I said. "They don't really know about it." "Why not?" I shrugged. "It's hard to explain. Sometimes people don't really want to hear things they don't understand." She looked down at the coin again. "I think it's cool," she said. "I think you're like a secret hero. Like in the books I read." I swallowed the knot rising in my throat. "Thanks, Lil," I said. "That means more than you know." She held the coin out to me, but I pushed it gently back toward her. "Keep it for tonight," I said. "You can give it back in the morning." She smiled, teeth slightly crooked in that way kids have before braces, then hugged me around the middle before slipping off the bed. "Good night, Aunt Sam." "Good night." After she left, I sat there in the dim light for a long time listening to the hum of the house. No one else in that house knew anything about what I did. No one had ever asked. But Lily had. And for once, I didn't feel invisible. I felt seen. Completely and honestly. By a 9-year-old in pajamas with stars on her shirt, I lay back, one arm behind my head, staring at the ceiling. The coin glinted faintly on the nightstand. Maybe that was all I needed. One voice. One truth. One person who didn't laugh or dismiss or change the subject. Someone who just listened. The invitation came by courier, hand delivered in a white envelope with gold embossed lettering. Vanessa didn't text or call, just sent the envelope like it was an award ceremony and not another one of her perfectly choreographed events. The gala was for Carter Lux's newest contract, a global partnership with a luxury hotel chain, expanding into the U.S. Vanessa was hosting the kickoff celebration at the Langford Hotel in Uptown Charlotte. Crystal chandeliers, imported linens, a jazz trio flown in from New York. I was tempted to decline. I had just rotated off a high-tempo assignment and was looking forward to a quiet weekend. But Dad called twice asking if I would be there. "You know your sister worked hard on this one," he said. "She'd really appreciate it if you came." That was unlikely. But I agreed. The ballroom glowed in amber lighting, tables dressed in black velvet, gold-accented name cards at every seat. Everyone around me sparkled, gowns, cufflinks, laughter. Vanessa wore silver, a shade just shy of white, because even in a room full of lights, she had to be the brightest. Brian, her husband, stood near the bar in a tailored tuxedo, glass of something dark in his hand. "Samantha, there you are," he said, with that fixed grin he always wore. I nodded. "Thanks for coming," he added. "Vanessa will be thrilled." I doubt that, I thought, but kept my smile polite. The place card next to his read Karen Langford, and I immediately recognized her name from Vanessa's Instagram captions. One of her longtime clients turned socialite friend. Blonde, tan, always on the move. She slid into the seat beside me a few minutes later. "So you're the mystery sister," she said brightly. "I've heard so much about you that made one of us." I offered a nod. "Just Samantha is fine." Karen sipped her wine and leaned closer. "You're still in the military, right?" she asked lightly. "Like, active duty?" I nodded. "Army." "Oh wow," she said. "Like overseas stuff or more like office work?" Brian chuckled. "Probably a little of both, right, Sam?" I opened my mouth to answer, but Vanessa's voice cut in from the other end of the table. "Sam handles logistics and coordination. Mostly data stuff. She's great at organizing intel." There was a pause. Karen blinked. "So like, spreadsheets and reports." "You'd be surprised," Vanessa added smoothly. "Not everyone's built for action, but Sam keeps the machine running." Brian laughed lightly. That sounds important, he said with a wink. A few others joined in with polite chuckles. I set my wine glass down carefully. I didn't feel sad. I didn't even feel angry. I felt clear, like glass. Like they could see right through me and still not notice anything real. I looked down the table at Vanessa. Her laugh was the loudest. Her hands moved as she told stories. She held court with practiced ease. This was her world. Karen turned back to me. That must be tough, she said, being away all the time. You probably miss birthdays and holidays and stuff. Sometimes, I said evenly. But the work matters. She nodded vaguely, not really listening. Vanessa shifted the conversation, quickly announcing her next project, an influencer retreat in Malibu for a tech lifestyle brand. Brian bragged about locking in an investment deal with an international property group. Someone asked if Vanessa was considering a speaking tour. Oh, maybe, she said coyly. I've been approached by a few platforms. I sat back listening. Watching. They knew nothing about the things I did. About what it meant to brief a team knowing their lives might depend on your call. About waking at 0400 to intercept a signal chain. About the silence after a mission. No press, no fanfare, just a quiet room and the knowledge that you made the right choice at the right time. But that wasn't glamorous. It didn't make for a good dinner anecdote. Brian leaned in again. You ever think about going private sector, Sam? Plenty of companies would love someone with your background. Probably more money too, I smiled tightly. It's not about the money, Karen tilted her head. So what is it about then? Before I could answer, Vanessa chimed in. Sam's always been good at following structure, she said. That's why the army works for her. Everything has a rule. Everything's neat. There it was again. The frame she always put me in. Measured. Safe. Predictable. I could have corrected her. I could have told the story of the time I broke protocol to escalate a threat that turned out to be real. I could have mentioned the lives that depended on my instincts, not just my reports. But I didn't. Because this wasn't the place. And these weren't the people. I looked around the table at polished smiles and polished silverware and polished lives. Let them laugh. Let them sip and speculate. They didn't know me. And they didn't need to. Because tomorrow I'd be back in a windowless ops center with a team that trusted me to make the call, and that mattered more than anything they'd toast to in this room. The hum of low conversation drifted beneath the music from the corner, trio notes from a stand-up bass rippling through polished air. I sat quietly, the stem of my wine glass cool between my fingers, watching the swirl of people and their practiced smiles. Brian leaned toward Molly with a joke about something the DJ forgot to cue last week at a corporate retreat. Karen was laughing again, a big, easy sound that didn't quite reach her eyes. Charlotte looked satisfied, her face glowing under warm light sipping from her glass, as if all of this reflected perfectly on her. And then someone said the thing. So, Sam is still single. It came from Molly, her voice sugar-dusted with wine and amusement. I turned, slightly aware of every set of eyes that had just shifted in my direction. Not married, no, I said, setting my glass down. Dating, she asked, still smiling. Or is it like one of those military things, married to the mission? A few people chuckled, including Brian. Or maybe it's just hard to keep a relationship going with all the push-ups and saluting. I managed to smile, though I could feel it tightening at the edges. Karen leaned in, playing along. I mean, no offense, but it can't be easy meeting people between decoding terrorist chatter, right? Vanessa said nothing. She just sipped her wine, looking serene. I opened my mouth, not sure what I'd say, some generic line about priorities, or maybe a short, polite answer. But I didn't get the chance. The clink came first. A small, precise sound as a spoon hit porcelain. Everyone turned. Lily stood at the far end of the table, barely visible behind the centerpiece. She looked small in her sky-blue dress, the one with embroidered stars. Her cheeks were pink, but her eyes were steady. Stop making fun of her, the room fell silent. She stepped forward from her chair, hands curled into loose fists at her sides. Her voice was clear, not loud, but certain. Aunt Sam isn't just some army person, she's a hero, a beat past. You could hear someone breathing across the table. She saves people you don't know because you don't ask. But she helps soldiers and makes hard decisions that keep people safe. Karen blinked. Molly's hand went to her mouth. Charlotte lowered her glass and looked suddenly uncertain. Vanessa froze. Lily looked down the table, then straight at me. She gave me a coin. It says she sees things other people don't. That's why her team listens to her. Her voice didn't waver. She's not throwing parties or pouring drinks or picking napkins. She's doing stuff that matters, and I want to be like her one day. Vanessa reached out, tried to take Lily's hand. Sweetheart, that's enough. Lily pulled her hand back gently but firmly. No, it's not enough. You all laugh like she's a joke, but she's the bravest person I know. She turned to Brian. You think making deals makes you important, but you've never saved anybody's life. Then to Molly. You think being funny is kindness, but it's just easy. And then back to Vanessa. You tell everyone what a boss you are, but you've never even asked Aunt Sam what she actually does. Vanessa's face paled slightly. Her lips parted, but nothing came out. Charlotte whispered her name, a warning maybe, but it was too late. The room had shifted. Lily sat back down, slowly reached for her glass of water, and took a sip. She didn't cry, she didn't even fidget. Molly looked down. Karen cleared her throat, her voice gone flat. Wow, I didn't know, she said. That's impressive. Brian mumbled something I couldn't catch. Vanessa tried to reset the room. Lily gets passionate sometimes, she said with a laugh that sounded tinny. No one laughed with her. Charlotte reached for a dinner roll and set it down without eating. I stayed silent. I didn't trust my voice. My chest felt tight, but not in pain and shock. Like someone had opened a window in a house I didn't know had been locked. For the first time in my life in that house at that table, I hadn't had to explain who I was. Someone else did it for me. Someone who actually knew. And no one could look away. Lily turned and looked at me again, a small nod. Like a soldier signaling to another. That one look held more truth than everything Vanessa had ever said about family or legacy or loyalty. Respect didn't have to be loud. It could come from a child with stars on her dress and conviction in her spine. I didn't remember the rest of the night. Just that after Lily spoke, no one really said much. Conversations tapered off. Laughter didn't restart. People excused themselves earlier than planned. Vanessa didn't meet my eyes as she walked us out. Brian tried, then gave up. Charlotte touched my shoulder at the door, not hard. Not apologetic. Just there. But Lily lingered near the staircase. Good night, Aunt Sam, she said. Good night, Lil. She smiled again. I'm gonna keep the coin for a while if that's okay, I nodded. It's yours, she waved, then slipped up the stairs. The door shut behind me softly, the night cooler than I expected. For once, I didn't feel like I was walking away from a fight. I felt like someone else had already won it for me. A few days after the dinner, I was back at Fort Belvoir, waist-deep in a classified report on disinformation campaigns linked to a new digital front in Eastern Europe. The walls of my office were the same shade of government gray. They'd always been the overhead lights buzzing faintly, the room quiet, except for the tap of fingers on keyboards. I liked it that way. Out here the world was complicated. In here it was focused. Then my phone rang. Vanessa's name blinked on the screen. I let it buzz once, twice. I could have ignored it. I wanted to. But curiosity got the better of me. I answered. What's going on? I asked, not bothering with hello. You talked to someone, didn't you? She snapped, voice tight. I blinked. About what? Don't play dumb. You know exactly what I mean. The Delacourt contract, it's gone. Just like that. Pulled 3 days before signing. I leaned back in my chair, phone cradled between my shoulder and cheek. That's rough, don't you dare, she hissed. The client said something about inappropriate remarks at a private event. A dinner. My dinner. She claimed her brother's military. That someone told her what I said about you. About soldiers. That I embarrassed myself. That I humiliated my sister in front of guests. I let that hang in the air. You think I leaked that story? Vanessa exhaled sharply. I think it's suspicious that a week after my daughter has a meltdown at my own table, this woman decides to pull the biggest contract I've landed all year. So let me get this straight, I said evenly. Your daughter stood up for someone you belittled. In public. At a table full of strangers. And now that there are consequences, you think it's a setup. You don't get it, Sam. This was a multi-million-dollar deal. This was a wedding, a six-figure event, full media coverage, future business for years, and it evaporated because someone thought I don't respect the troops. I stared at the wall, blinking slowly. You don't respect the troops, that's not fair, she shot back. I respect you. I respect what you do. No, you don't, I said calmly. You respect what I do when it's convenient, when it makes you look generous, patriotic. But when you're playing hostess, you treat it like I stock office supplies. She went silent. I could hear her breathing on the other end. Vanessa, I didn't say a word to anyone. I didn't need to. People saw what they saw. They heard what you said. They watched a 9-year-old call out a room full of adults for mocking something they didn't understand. You think this is funny? No, I said. I think it's justice. There was a pause. I waited. She asked quietly, do you know the Delacourt woman's brother's name? I nodded, though she couldn't see it. James Delacourt. Captain. Army Rangers. He was part of the Cascade Sentinel Task Force in Syria. One of the lead ground team commanders. Vanessa said nothing. He was the one whose convoy I rerouted. The one I saved. He sent me a letter 6 months ago. Handwritten. Said he owed me his life. Still silence. I didn't tell her any of this until last week. She happened to mention your name when talking about venues. Said you had a beautiful team, but someone in your inner circle had poor judgment in private settings. Vanessa's voice cracked. She told you that. She told me that her brother respects integrity more than champagne fountains. Vanessa inhaled sharply. Why didn't you warn me? Because I'm not your PR team, I said. I'm your sister. And I've spent my whole life being polite while you turned me into the family punchline. It's not my job to protect your business from your behavior. The line went quiet again. Then quietly, she's not coming back, is she? I don't think so. We were counting on that money. I almost laughed. Not out of cruelty, just out of the absurdity that she still didn't get it. This wasn't about money, Vanessa. It never was. This was about the fact that, for the first time in your career, you weren't the smartest person in the room. And someone noticed. I heard a chair scrape in the background. Papers shifting, her life unraveling by inches. So what do I do now? She asked. That's your call. You really didn't say anything to her. I told her the truth, I said. That I work in intelligence. That I make hard calls. That sometimes, if you pay attention, the world reveals who people are when they think no one's watching. And what about Lily? What about her? She's still talking about you, Vanessa said quietly. She asked if I'd ever helped someone the way you have. I didn't know what to say. I didn't answer right away. She'll figure things out, I said eventually. She's smart. She sees through people. Even you. Vanessa didn't reply. I ended the call without a goodbye. Then I stared out the window of my office. The view was nothing. Just a brick wall and a sliver of the parking lot. But for the first time in years, it felt wide open. I didn't have to raise my voice. I didn't have to expose Vanessa or shame her. She did it herself. And someone who mattered saw the truth. That was enough. It was a Thursday morning when the front desk called my office and said I had a civilian visitor. That's unusual, I told the sergeant on duty. She said her name's Charlotte Blake. She's already cleared security and has a temp badge. Says, she's your mother. I closed the file I'd been reviewing and stood up slowly. The room around me, filled with classified folders and blinking monitors, suddenly felt too warm. I hadn't seen Charlotte face to face since that dinner. And I hadn't expected to. She wasn't the type to leave her comfort zone unless absolutely necessary. I met her in the visitor center, a low-ceilinged room with beige chairs and a vending machine that hadn't worked since last October. She was seated stiffly in the corner, hands folded neatly in her lap, a silk scarf tucked into her beige trench coat. She looked out of place, as if she'd been dropped into a setting that offended her senses. She stood when she saw me. Samantha, thank you for taking a moment. I nodded once. It's standard. Family can be received during designated hours with proper clearance. She gave a polite smile like we were making small talk before a church fundraiser. I came because of Lily. I sat down across from her. Go on. Her eyes darted toward the window and back to me. She's been repeating what happened at the dinner party, telling everyone. Teachers, her piano instructor, even her friend's mom during carpool. It's been distracting. I waited. Charlotte adjusted her scarf slightly. Vanessa says she'll talk to her. She's too young to understand nuance. She overreacted. I raised an eyebrow. Nuance. She sighed. You know how children are. They pick up things and amplify them. Lily meant well, I'm sure. But it wasn't appropriate. I leaned forward. Maybe it was the first time anyone said the right thing in that house. Maybe it wasn't about being appropriate. Maybe it was about being brave. Charlotte didn't reply right away. You're turning her against her mother, she said after a pause. I laughed. Not loudly, not cruelly. Just enough. I didn't turn her against anyone. I answered her question. That's all. She shook her head gently. She idolizes you now. It's getting hard for Vanessa. That's not my fault either. We sat in silence. The kind that made the humming light above us sound louder than it was. Charlotte folded her hands tighter. Vanessa said you told the Delacourt woman about what happened at the dinner. That you cost her a major contract. I didn't cost her anything. I told the truth. And it turns out someone in that family had a reason to listen. Charlotte's lips pressed into a line. It's been hard on all of us. I looked at her, really looked. Her tailored clothes, her subtle pearl earrings, the tight way she held herself together like a vase already cracked once too many times. You know what was hard, I said softly. Watching my own mother figure sit at every dinner table and pretend I was invisible. Watching you beam at Vanessa for every ribbon she cut, every magazine feature while I went to boot camp alone. You never came to a single graduation. You never even asked what I did until someone else told you it mattered. She opened her mouth, then closed it. You don't know what it was like for me, Charlotte finally said, her voice tighter. I was 19 when I married your father. I stepped into a house that wasn't mine, raising a child I hadn't birthed. I was just trying to keep peace. I nodded slowly. And you kept peace by keeping me small. She looked down at her lap. You were always different. No, I said, I was always quieter. That's not the same thing. She didn't respond. I leaned back. Do you remember the summer I got invited to the state science camp? When I was 13, Charlotte blinked. Sort of. You and Vanessa told me I couldn't go. You said it was too far, too dangerous, that it didn't suit me. Her eyes shifted. We were trying to protect you. I waited. Were you? She didn't answer. I didn't need your permission to succeed, I said. But I needed room. I needed to know I was allowed to be seen. Not compared, not erased. Charlotte looked up, and for the first time she seemed older than I remembered. Not weak. Just weathered. I'm not asking you to apologize, I continued. I know better than that by now. But you should know I never wanted to beat Vanessa. I just wanted to exist without being blurred into the background of her spotlight. Charlotte stood slowly. It's complicated. It's not. She held her handbag tighter and nodded once. Well. I walked her to the security door. She turned once as the guard approached. Lily asked if she could visit you sometime. I told her I'd ask. Tell her I'd like that. Charlotte didn't say goodbye. She just stepped through the door, and the silence that followed was deeper than the one before. I stood there for a long moment, the buzz of bass activity moving around me like a current. No apology. But maybe, just maybe, a beginning. It was a quiet Saturday afternoon when I heard the knock. Not the firm businesslike tap of a delivery driver or the lazy rattle of someone dropping by. This was hesitant, uneven. I peeked through the window and saw her. Vanessa. No makeup. No sunglasses, no designer coat or heels. Just a gray hoodie, jeans, and her hair pulled into a loose bun. She looked like someone I might have passed at the grocery store and not recognized. I opened the door and stepped aside. She didn't speak right away, just stood there like she wasn't sure if I'd shut the door in her face or let her in. You look different, I said finally. She glanced down at herself. It's the first time I haven't worn mascara in public since college. I stepped back. You want coffee? She nodded. I led her into the kitchen. The sun was streaming in through the blinds, casting lines across the floor. I poured 2 mugs black and handed her one. We sat at the small table by the window, the one I used for late-night intel briefings and early morning reports. She held the mug like she needed something to anchor her. I'm not going to circle around it, she said. I came because I need to say some things, and I don't expect you to forgive me. But I need to say them anyway. I didn't speak, I just waited. She took a breath. I've always needed to be the best. Since I was a kid, straight A's, awards, college early. Every room I walked into I felt like I had to prove I belonged. That I mattered. I know that, Vanessa. No you don't, she said quietly. Because I never let you see the part that didn't feel so sure. The part that was terrified of failing. And the truth is I needed you to be beneath me. Not because you weren't good. But because if you rose too high, I'd have to admit I wasn't the only one who earned something in this family. She looked up at me then. I needed you to be quiet. To be small. So I could be big. I sipped my coffee, the warmth grounding me. I waited for the sting, but it didn't come. Just a strange kind of clarity. You're not wrong, I said. That's exactly what it felt like. She set her cup down, both hands resting on the table now. And when you actually did something incredible, something I could never touch or fake or buy, I panicked. I told myself it was just paperwork because I couldn't handle the fact that my little sister had become someone whose job saves lives. I stared out the window at a squirrel darting across the fence. You know I never wanted to compete with you. She looked down. I know, I wanted to matter. I wanted to be seen. Not in comparison to you. Not as a shadow of your spotlight, just as myself. Her voice dropped. I made it impossible for that to happen. I nodded slowly. You didn't do it alone. Charlotte helped. Dad never saw what he didn't want to see. But you knew. And you made the choice to step on me to feel taller. She swallowed. You're right. We sat there in silence. Not heavy, not angry. Just real. I stirred the coffee in my cup. You're not wrong for wanting to be successful, Vanessa. That's never been the problem. She looked at me, eyes weary. Then what was you were wrong for treating me like part of your backdrop? Like I was a prop in the stage of your life. Not a person. Not your sister. She didn't cry, neither did I. There was no hug. No dramatic reconciliation. Just truth finally sitting on the table between us. She reached for her cup again, hands steady. Lily still talks about you. She wears that coin like a secret badge. Says you're her hero. I smiled a little. She's braver than most people I've met in uniform. Vanessa smiled back faintly. I'm glad she sees you. I really am. I looked at her, really looked, and for the first time I didn't see the CEO or the perfectionist. I saw a tired woman who had spent her whole life sprinting for a kind of validation that never really fed her. I didn't need an apology in words. She had shown up. She had stripped off the armor. That was enough. She stood after a while. I should go. I nodded. Okay. She lingered at the door. Thank you for the coffee. I shrugged. Thank you for showing up. She opened the door, paused, then walked down the steps without looking back. I closed it gently behind her. No rage, no sorrow, no joy, just space. Quiet, solid space where something heavy had once been. And for the first time I realized I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't invisible either. I was just me. And that was finally enough. The week after Vanessa left my house, the days settled into a steady rhythm again. Debriefs, unit updates, classified briefings, and quiet lunches in the corner booth of the commissary. Peace I was learning wasn't loud. It was just the absence of always bracing for dismissal. Then one afternoon, I found the envelope. It was tucked inside my office mailbox, nestled between a base-wide memo and an internal audit form. Pink construction paper unevenly folded with my name written in big, slightly smudged purple marker. A unicorn sticker sealed the flap, its horn nearly worn off from handling. No return address, just the unmistakable handwriting of a 9-year-old. I opened it carefully. Inside, the pencil-written lines were pressed so firmly into the paper that they had left soft indentations. Each word was a small act of effort and belief. Dear Aunt Sam. We had to write about someone we admire for class. Everyone else picked a singer or a football player. I picked you. I told my teacher that you don't wear a cape, but you're the bravest person I know. You do things most people don't even see, and you never brag. You just help. I said that makes you a real hero. The teacher smiled and said I should bring a picture. But I said you don't take many because real heroes don't need the camera. They just do the work and go home. I want to be brave like you. I want to help people and not need anyone to clap. Love, Lily. There was a crayon drawing taped to the bottom. 2 stick figures, one with a small ponytail and a big coin in her hand, and one with a short military haircut and a badge on her chest. Above them floated stars and what I guessed was a helicopter. I didn't cry, but something in my chest cracked open like a window finally letting air into a stale room. I laid the letter on my desk beside the photo of my unit after Cascade Sentinel. The day we got back, all of us covered in dust and sweat, grinning like kids after a scrappy win. We had saved lives. We had made it out. That photo had lived alone on my desk for over a year. Now it had company. I gently slid Lily's letter into a protective sleeve and placed it behind the glass next to the photo. 2 different kinds of missions. 2 different kinds of validation. I sat there a while just looking at them. That drawing. That letter. They weren't meant for performance. They were never intended to impress. They were offerings. Truth spoken without calculation. It struck me that Lily had never asked for details. She hadn't needed to hear war stories or read awards. She believed in me because of how I made her feel safe, how I listened, how I existed in her world, without expecting anything in return. She had seen me. In a way my parents never had. In a way, Vanessa hadn't learned to until recently. And it wasn't because I'd shouted louder or demanded attention. It was because I had simply been myself. Quiet. Consistent. Real. It reminded me of something a commanding officer once told me in training back when I was just another hopeful recruit still trying to outpace ghosts. Leadership isn't about barking orders. It's about showing up when it matters. Staying when it's hard. Listening when others don't. That's what Lily had done for me, even if she didn't know it. She'd shown up. When the room laughed, when the adults dismissed, when the truth was inconvenient, she stood. She saw the weight of what I carried and chose not to look away. And her words, scribbled in pencil and framed in crayon, cut deeper than any polished speech. I reread her letter twice more before I turned off my computer and gathered my things. I slid the photo and letter into my go bag, taking them home that night instead of leaving them on display. They weren't for everyone else. They were for me. A reminder that being seen, truly seen, doesn't require fame or medals or even family approval. Sometimes all it takes is one small voice willing to say what others never dared. That night, I pinned Lily's drawing to the fridge in my apartment, right next to a grocery list and a faded takeout menu. It looked a little out of place surrounded by reminders of errands and deadlines. But every time I walked past, I smiled. Because in a world that often mistook silence for weakness, that little girl's letter was proof that quiet strength echoes the longest. The deployment order came in quietly, the way most things do in my world. No big announcement. No farewell banners. Just a folder slid across my desk marked Priority. Operation Redstone. Intelligence coordination in Eastern Europe. High level, long duration, no definitive return date. I stared at the cover sheet for a long moment. The kind of stare that goes beyond reading, where your eyes skim the words, but your mind drifts somewhere else entirely. I'd been here before. The weight of duty in one hand, the ache of goodbye in the other. Except this time, it didn't feel like leaving something behind. It felt like carrying something forward. I packed light. I always did. Field journal, encrypted tablet, backup IDs. And one small laminated photo tucked into the front pocket of my bag. The one of my unit from Cascade Sentinel, now paired with a folded letter from a 9-year-old who saw me clearer than most adults ever had. The apartment was clean. Tidy. I had set the thermostat, unplugged the coffee pot, fed the neighbor's cat for the last time this week. No one was coming to send me off. No one needed to. That used to hurt. Now it just felt quiet. At the base, the pre-deployment briefing moved fast. We were a tight team, most of us used to reading each other's thoughts before they were spoken. My commanding officer nodded once when he saw me. Glad you're leading intel on this one. We need clarity out there. I gave a short nod back. Always. Later that evening, I sat alone in the ready room going over satellite feeds and early intercept reports. The room was dim, the only sound a low mechanical hum from the air system. A few red pushpins on the map behind me marked probable movements. I leaned back, hands folded behind my head, staring at the ceiling. My phone buzzed once. A photo from Lily. Her at school holding a small coin-shaped badge she'd made out of cardboard. It was gold and silver crayon with the words, "My hero," written in thick marker. The caption read, "I showed this to my class. They said I was lucky." I stared at it until the screen dimmed. I didn't text back. Not because I didn't care, but because I wanted to sit with the feeling a little longer. For most of my life, I'd waited for recognition from the wrong people. A nod from Charlotte. A rare compliment from Vanessa. Some kind of moment where I'd finally be worthy in their eyes. But worth doesn't come from being acknowledged. It comes from knowing deep in your bones that what you do matters even if no one ever claps. And maybe that's what Lily had given me without knowing it. A new place to stand. One not built from resentment or rivalry but from quiet certainty. The kind that doesn't waver when someone questions you. The kind that doesn't need an audience. It took nearly 3 decades for me to stop performing for people who never really looked. To realize that family isn't where you're born, it's where you're seen. Lily saw me. Sarah back at base saw me. The teams I led. The people whose lives I helped protect. They saw me too. And for the first time in my life, that felt like enough. Outside, the wind picked up. I zipped my field jacket a little higher and stepped onto the tarmac. One of the junior analysts waved as she passed by a stack of encrypted files under her arm. She smiled in the way soldiers do, brief but full of grit. As I waited for transport, I thought of all the times I used to stand in Vanessa's parties like a ghost. All the times I held my tongue when someone made another paper pusher joke. All the moments I convinced myself silence was safer. Not anymore. Now silence was strength. The kind you wear like armor, not shackles. The kind that doesn't just protect, it frees. I wasn't invisible. Not anymore. Not in this uniform, not in this life, and not to the people who truly mattered. As the aircraft doors opened and I stepped into the humming cabin, I glanced back once toward the base buildings. The light in my old office was still on, flickering faintly. On the desk, I knew sat that letter and photo. A reminder. Not of who I used to be, but of who I had become. And I smiled. Because this wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about release. It was about rewriting the story, not to prove something to others, but to finally live it for myself. If you've ever been dismissed, overlooked, or made to feel invisible in your own family, I hope this story found you. And if someone once said you were too quiet to matter, let this be proof that quiet can roar louder than applause. Tell me, has your family ever made you feel unseen? What would you say to them now? Leave a comment, share this with someone who needs it, and don't forget to subscribe. More stories like this are waiting, stories that remind us that even when we're quiet, we're never alone.